Got it. And then click pause.
Good morning, everyone. No, there's Councillor Butler again. It is 9:30. I will call this regular meeting of Council of the Municipality of Jasper to order for July 20th, 2021. Although it is yet to be approved, it appears that we have a relatively short agenda today. So I want to take a moment just to give an acknowledgement of a different sort. After a conception stretching back at least 3 decades prior, after a lengthy, difficult, sometimes torturous gestation, after years of contractions, false labor, uncertainty, and stress, with the able assistance throughout of a host of dedicated midwives, doulas, assorted politicians, professionals, administrators, supporters, and well-wishers, after a relatively short and intense final push to delivery, after crowning with the resounding ratification vote of residents, 20 years ago to this very day, we witnessed the birth of the municipality of Jasper. 2 decades on, our progeny remains strong, stable, and solvent, healthy, vibrant, and vital, able, it appears, to weather adversity, to survive unexpected trials and tribulations, to continue to strive to deliver on its promise, to be warm, welcoming, and inclusive, and to offer safe haven, a home, and a future for so many. There are no festivities planned, no celebrations, no pomp and ceremony, no birthday cake so far as I am aware. A reflection perhaps of a community culture of modesty. We have never officially celebrated this day. It is not Jasper Day, as we know, but it is a significant day in the history of our community and well worth applause to recognize. So I take this opportunity to wish all of you and all of Jasper a warm, joyful, safe, and celebratory 20th anniversary. I see applause. Thank you. So with that, I will turn to the orders of the day. Councillors, you have today's proposed agenda. Are there any deletions, additions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? Councillor Keller-Hrampe.
I would just like to add under new business parking lot in the S block, the new parking lot. Not a lot on it. I just want the permission of council to put it on the committee of the whole for the next upcoming meeting. So I thought I'd put it on at new business today to see if there is the will of council.
Thank you, Councillor Keller-Hrampe. So that would be added as agenda item 10.1. Any other additions, deletions, or other changes to be made to the agenda? All right, may I have a motion, please? I will take it from you, Councillor Keller-Hrampe, to amend the agenda by the addition of item 10.1. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. And may I have a motion then to approve the agenda for today's meeting as amended? Thank you, Councillor Demota. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Agenda item 3, approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of July 6th, 2021. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to be made to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion, please, to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 6, 2021 as presented? Councillor Wilson, thank you. All in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. We have no presentations scheduled today, so that takes us past agenda item 4, and to agenda item 5, business arising from previous minutes. Councillor Journeau.
Thank you, Your Honor, Mr. Mayor Ireland, for the entire 20 years that we've been here, and congratulations to you as well for that accomplishment, and congratulations to the municipality of Jasper. My business arising is not really a business arising, but it's a point in the comment that I want to make regarding motion 298.21, which was the motion to increase the project by a large sum and award the contract. And I again stress that when a project goes way over, it should be revisited. And like I mentioned in my comments before, is that we should start over. There's no hurry here. And I will continue to maintain that. I think we owe that to the taxpayer. And then starting over means a request for proposal. So that means exploring all the possibilities. And because I don't think this was done here. There was still a possibility of having the water sewer on the backside of the property. We just did some work on that last year. So I think that's rather regrettable that we did not go for a request for proposal from the outset, and again, restart again without setting any parameters. As soon as you set parameters, you've limited the scope of the ideas and the technology that might follow. So to me, that's regrettable. Secondly, I'm concerned, I have been concerned, however, the public is no outcry, that we borrowed $3 million with no notice to the public. We simply went ahead and just increased the amount, didn't notify the people. That's a lot of money. May not be a lot of money in a big city, but it's a lot of money in a small town, and it affects our taxpayers in a big way. That a project would just kind of double and, oh, well, we'll discharge it to the taxpayer. I'm very concerned about that. We have not received any protest on it, so I guess it's okay. The press didn't cover it, so I don't see that it's regrettable because the public isn't notified. But I remain to be concerned that I think that we could have done a better job for the taxpayer in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. I would say that with respect to the borrowing, my recollection is that we gave first reading to a bylaw, but that bylaw has yet to go through the entire process. So we will need a bylaw to borrow. So it is not closed to public comment, and we'll follow the process that is necessary for borrowing bylaws. Mr. Given, I believe I saw your hand up. Go ahead.
Your Worship, yeah, just from a process perspective, I wanted to confirm to Council and to the public, certainly that the borrowing bylaw will come before Council 2 more times before ultimately Council passes it, if that's your desire. So the borrowing bylaw has not been passed, and there will be a significant time for public consultation and for discussion about this project. And just additionally, to confirm that at each stage of the project, administration did go through a public process in terms of RFPs when we sought consultants for the detailed design. And that was ultimately awarded to WSP through a public RFP process. We went through a process of pre-qualification of contractors, recognizing the speed at which this project needed to move if we were going to be in the ground in order to support not just the GB development, but also the potential GC development. So we pre-qualified contractors through a public process that was publicly advertised. And then ultimately the construction, the project that was brought forward to Council and the recommendation was the result of another public process and requests for proposals from those pre-qualified contractors. So just for Council's confidence and the community's confidence, there were actually, I guess, public processes at every stage of this project before administration made that recommendation to award construction last week. So I just wanted to provide that clarity just so the Council can have that confidence.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Butler, and then I'll return to Councillor Journeau.
I think it's unfortunate the choice to essentially reopen debate on a number of steps that council took through proper motion and proper process. The process that administration followed that Mr. Given just described, which did in fact involve a request for proposal, even though there was a suggestion that a request for proposal was not done, it was. And that process was one that council chose through a previous motion. Administration proceeded exactly in the manner in which council chose through motion. And council asked administration to proceed quickly on this process following recommendations from the Jasper Community Housing Corporation to proceed as quickly as reasonably possible to put services in the ground on this. The process that administration followed was exactly as directed by council. And the fact that the cost of the project came in much higher than anticipated is an unfortunate reality of the environment in which we're doing business these days. I think it's really unfortunate to blame the process when the numbers come in higher than was expected. The reason council chose to go ahead, as was clearly stated when we passed the motion to move forward, is that we've agreed that the process is, or the project is that important to the community. And the fact that administration and council were proceeding under a misapprehension as to what it would cost is just an unfortunate reality of everything in the construction world these days. Costs come in higher. The question was asked as to whether WSP, as our consultant, had looked at all of the options, including providing water and sewer through the back. And the question was answered that yes, those options were looked at. I believe administration and the consultants that were hired, who are highly skilled, looked at all of the options, including the obvious one that come in through the backyard. I just regret that administration and the process that was followed is being impugned here, frankly, after the fact. The question of borrowing, yes, it'll come back to council, but I think it's important to understand administration followed the process we asked them to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Junot.
Well, thank you for that. First of all, we say we use the consultant of WSP. That is not tendered. So that is right away limits the ideas, limits the possibilities. That's one thing. I'm not criticizing the process, but when a project comes in at a higher amount, my point is that we should revisit. No criticism of the process. But when the process comes in at 7 million instead of 4 million, we should revisit. And one of the ways is to start from scratch, start over with a proper request for proposal. In other words, don't set any parameters. Allow all the ideas to come forth. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. Councillor Demota.
Yeah, you know, and just to try to keep the waters calm here, I think that Councillor Junot has a valid point, and I see where he's coming from, and I don't think that you know, he's really intending, or my impression of what he's intending is exactly what he said. And so you know, maybe council should be a little bit more informed on how we go about things and having WSP on retainer and all that, just so that there's less confusion behind. I see exactly. So I see Mr. Given shaking his head, but so however that whole thing works out, I think there's a few things are misconstrued. And before we can go ahead on, you know, making a decision on a project or borrowing on a project where, you know, the financing is essentially almost doubled, I think it does deserve a little bit more conversation. And I support Councillor Junot in bringing that up. You know, I might not fully agree with it, but I think that there's an opportunity for more clarity here. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. I would just say that this matter was subject to thorough debate 2 weeks ago. We just unanimously approved the minutes of the meeting that record the motion that followed the debate. We cannot continually relitigate matters. I appreciate that there were 2 councillors opposed to the motion, but that was the motion that was carried by council following debate, at which time these matters and others were pursued and could have been pursued further. But once the decision is made, it is made. And we also have, of course, a code of conduct bylaw now, which is relevant to the continuation of discussion. So I appreciate that some councillors took positions which were contrary to the majority of council, and that will always be the case, or may always be the case. But I think once a decision is made, and particularly once we have approved that that is what the decision was, then it's time to carry on. But I thank you for your comments. Eddie, Councillor Demota?
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that, and I totally understand what you're saying. And yes, it's all true. But you know, going forward in the future, maybe just a little bit more clarity on the steps, and maybe a couple of us missed it. And I'm not trying to defend anyone's position at a prior decision-making process. I'm just talking about understanding the process better. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business arising from previous minutes? If not, then we can move to agenda item 6, department reports, finance and administration. And Mrs. Melanchuk, I presume.
Your Worship, Ms. Melanchuk is here to present an update to council. I'll just say, over the last couple of years, significant amount of work on budget as the municipality and council have tried to adjust to the context of COVID. And we appreciate from an administration perspective that has meant that a lot of our horsepower has been directed at making those changes and managing the budget, and not as much has been dedicated to council's regular expectation of providing budget updates to council in the regular cycle that you've been used to. So Natasha and her team have done some significant work over the last while and are now, I think, at a place where they can get back to providing updates in the format that council expects and had been used to. She's here to do that today. And I think we could maybe have a discussion at another time about the level of detail that council would like and what other information could be helpful to council on a regular basis about the operation of the organization that would allow you to identify trends. Certainly financial information is here for you to look at in context in the big picture. There may be other types of information that could be useful to you. And I'd suggest that as we get back into the regular cycle of financial reporting, it might be an opportunity for us to discuss what other types of reporting could be useful to council on a quarterly basis to keep you informed about sort of the pace and trends within the organization. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Natasha to resume the regular process that I think all of you are familiar with and that Natasha is intimately familiar with. So Tash, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbon. Good morning, Your Worship and Council. Thanks for the summary. Yes, things have been different over the past while, so I appreciate you going over that. This morning, my report highlights a financial summary of where we are for the end of June. First 2 pages goes over the revenue and expenses and where we currently are at the end of June for 2021 versus 2020. So as you can see, we are currently at 64% of our revenue at 50% of the year and 31% of our expenses. At this point last year, we were sitting at 69% of the revenue and 35% of expenses. However, again, we must keep in mind that they were very, very different budget years. So that goes over the first 2 pages of the report. Now it also goes into each department. You can see the differences that lies between both years on those regards as well. The next page, so the 3rd page of the report, goes over council and the expenditures that council has gone through up to June 30th as well for 2020 versus 2021. And you can see that this year council is very similar to the prior year, sitting at about $128,000 versus last year at $119,000 expended. So very, very similar, considering that the years were very, very different. Although we still are feeling the impact of COVID for sure. The next report goes over our capital and where we sit at the moment. Now you gotta please remember that these change daily as well as we go through payables, receive more invoices and issue payments. So this is changing every aspect of finance changes every day. But this is where our capital projects are sitting at the moment at the end of June. And so that's a 2-page summary there. And then we go into our balance sheet for the municipality. And this was lacking in my reports for a while, even in prior year, just because there was a problem with the report itself, but it has been fixed and is now being part of the reporting that you'll see going forward. And that is it. And I'm available for any questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Smelachuk. Questions from councillors? Councillor Journeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank Mrs. Smelachuk for presenting these. This is exactly what I think was part of a comment made by Councillor Butler a while ago, that we don't get the financial reporting. So I think that this should be more frequent than, I don't think we've had one for quite some time. So I believe that at least the income statement and the balance sheet should be presented monthly. I appreciate, I mean, with today's technology, yes, you can leave out the councillor expenses. Don't have to have those every month. We don't spend a lot of money. We're good guys. And the project was a good, the capital spending, the projects that are outstanding, that was very informative. I had no idea where we stood, and we haven't had this before, so I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Trudeau. Other questions? I have a very general question then. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Butler.
No, I'll wait. Thank you.
I have a general question then, Ms. Smelachuk. Based on these numbers, is there anything which arises where you might recommend that council adapt a change in any respect? And I'm thinking in particular for the revenue stream and where we might stand with respect to deferrals of utilities and tax amounts, and whether there might be something in these numbers that would suggest that council takes some action.
Thank you for that question. At this moment, I'm not seeing anything standing out huge. However, that being said, I am putting a report together to bring to council next week as well, to go over any kind of outstanding taxes and utilities, to present it and be able to give council an opportunity to look at the past few years. So I was going to bring 2019, 20, and 21 to look at kind of where we might be sitting in the community for any kind of outstanding areas, and where we might want to look at any kind of situations that might be arising. However, like I said, at the moment, nothing huge is standing out, but those reports will be coming in more detail so that we can analyze like we've done in the past. In 2020, there was a report given on outstanding taxes as well as utilities to so that council could look at that possibility of if there was anything that we should be looking at going forward in that regard. So I think it was the 27th that we have that plan to bring to council, so you'll have more information detailed.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Councillor Butler and then Councillor Demota.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk, for the report. I do understand that other priorities have had to take a higher level of priority than ongoing reporting over the past couple of years, but I do appreciate seeing this back in front of us. I have one question on page 11 of our agenda package. We see liabilities, we see long-term debt at $9.2 million. And I wonder if it would be possible, and I am hesitant because I don't know how much work would be involved, but there have been a couple of questions from a few councillors about where we stand with respect to debt. And of course, we are in the process of reviewing proposal to take on additional debt. Could we see a schedule breaking out the long-term debt in terms of what the individual debentures are, the term of them, so that we can understand what our debt is now and how that will evolve over the years without any additions to it. Because I know that that long-term debt is taken up by a number of individual debentures, each of which would have a term, 25 years or 15 years. Or would a schedule like that at the convenience of administration be reasonable for us to see?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler, yes, I have that on my files, so I can put it together to present to Council in a more presentable format so that you can see where we stand, and definitely it's there. It's not an issue for me to bring it up and make it a part of the report coming to you. If it should be the wish of Council, no issue at all.
Your Worship, at Councillor Butler's question, if Ms. Melanchuk's able to pull that up relatively easily, my suggestion would be that that's something that we could email out to Council and just circulate for Council information. Certainly you could find it if you wanted to do the work of digging through all the bylaws. So it's public information. I don't know that the work of creating an additional report to present it is necessarily useful, but certainly we can circulate it to all of Council for your information. And then if there is detailed questions that you wanted to have, we could discuss those in the context of a committee meeting. I'm just mindful of Natasha's workload and writing another report. I think calling up the information, absolutely. And if Council is comfortable with it just being circulated by email for information, then I think that would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I'm certainly would be happy to see that circulated, but where it does, among Council, where it does come into play and might come into play, because the question was raised in the context of the borrowing bylaw that we are looking at. And part of the consideration of any borrowing bylaw should be, well, where do we stand relative to our debt limits and other anticipated future debentures that we may need to look at. So perhaps in the upcoming 2 readings of the current borrowing bylaw being considered, that information might be valuable as part of the public record. And I'm certainly not looking for a written report. I assume there might be really just a little table. So I respect, I do not want to create work unnecessarily, but it is an important part of the consideration when considering taking on additional debt. Because we do, of course, work with the debt ceiling, as we all know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Mr. Given, I will allow you to respond. I do know that you are in queue, Councillor Demota, and I will get to you, but we should finish this discussion. Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. So just to confirm, administration absolutely will provide that information. Would note that the current debt is a part of the bylaw. That's a requirement for us to have that. I think it is already a part of the report that Council saw last week. We can provide some more detail to that so Council can really understand what might be expiring over the coming years. And we can include that both in the report that you'd see at second reading, and we'll circulate it in advance to Council. I don't think that that's a difficulty.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demota, thank you for your patience. And then Councillor.
Well, that's good. Sometimes I get the silent head nod there, and I wasn't sure if I got that or you acknowledged me earlier. So thank you for that consideration. No, I wanted to thank Ms. Malinchuk for bringing this report to us. And you know, I think it, as much as council doesn't want to get into the weeds of administration, this gives us a pretty good finger on the pulse of our finances. And I really appreciate the update. I really appreciate the work behind it. And you know, I appreciate also the questions that the mayor and Councillor Butler brought forward. And I think those are pretty pertinent. And I was also waiting for where we were at with our tax requisition to date and how that's been progressing. And I knew that was coming because I think we got it shortly after our halfway mark last year. So looking forward to that. Again, just kudos and quality and the detail behind this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor DeBoda. Councillor Journeau.
Thank you very much. To quote Councillor DeMota, yes, getting into the weeds. But at this time of the year, I'd rather not get in the weeds because it's a little nasty. So I will sort of get into clover because the clover is in bloom these days and it smells nice and shows prosperity and so on and so forth. So I would like to get into the clover and ask a question to Mrs. Malinchuk about at this time of the year, two of our bigger payments is the request from the education funding and the Evergreen Foundation. And when I look at the balance sheet of June 30th, my question is has those amounts been paid or are they to be paid? In other words, are they part of the bank balance or is it gone? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Journeau. The Alberta School Foundation requisition occurs quarterly. So at this point, we would have seen a couple of the payments be issued, and the payments for the Evergreen have been issued. So yes, it is part and parcel of what you're seeing here.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau and Mrs. Malinchuk. Are there any other questions then with respect to this director's report from the Director of Finance and Administration? Seeing nothing, I thank you again, Mrs. Malinchuk. Appreciate it and look forward to the further information that you'll provide arising from the discussions today. Thank you for that. We could turn to agenda item 7, requests for decision, and a verbal report first, 7.1. Mr. Given, I presume that is you.
Yes, Your Worship. AUMA has a regular process of awards that they present at their annual convention. There's a bit of a challenge in that the awards require a motion of council to nominate anybody for an award. There is a AUMA award for distinguished service, which recognizes a municipal official who has served for 20 years or more with a municipality or municipalities in Alberta, and recognizing that the municipality of Jasper is 20 years old today. There is an opportunity for council, if they wish to nominate a municipal official for that award, it would be appropriate to do so. So administration wanted to bring that to council's attention and see if there might be a nomination of a member of council for that award, recognizing that the municipality is now 20 years old.
Councillor DeBoda.
Well, I certainly appreciate the formalities and, you know, a great level of gratitude here to Mr. Given for catching this and it being our 20th anniversary. It is my honor and on behalf of council, you know, happy anniversary to you, Mayor Ireland. You're amongst the many people you named earlier about helping Jasper achieve autonomy. And so having said that, I motion that council nominate Mayor Richard Ireland for the AUMA Distinguished Service Award.
Well, thank you for that. This is one of those difficult situations where I would prefer to absent myself from the vote.
Absolutely.
Unless there's a monetary prize, though, I think there is no pecuniary interest, and so I am prohibited by legislation from avoiding involvement in a vote. But I have your motion, Councillor Demota. Is there any debate?
Well, I just wanted to say, out of the 20 years that you've been officially the mayor of Jasper, and your service prior to that, it's been an honor to be part of 14 years of that with you, and I look forward to a little more.
Thank you for that. Councillor Journeau?
I don't think any debate is necessary. It's appropriate. I think it's, you get my, I'll second that nomination if that's, that motion, if that's necessary. I'm honored to support this nomination on as you, Mr. Mayor, as our mayor for 20 years on our anniversary. I'm deeply honored. I want to congratulate you for the fine work you've done, and you're receiving my whole support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland, and thank you very much, Mr. Given and Mr. Demota, Councillor Demota, for presenting this motion. And on behalf of Council, I very much appreciate this coming forward, and gratitude to you, Mayor Ireland, for all of the paving you have done for our community and where you have brought our community for future generations to come. So thank you very much, and very, very grateful for all of the service that you've provided us.
Thank you for that. Councillor Butler.
Well, thank you very much. I can't remain silent. I just echo all of the accolades stated. I'm very happy to see this coming forward. I wondered if all of Council agreed that if you receive the award, we would all buy you a beer, and then there'd be a pecuniary interest and yourself from the vote. Thank you very much, and congratulations.
Thank you for that. All right, if there is nothing else, I'll speak to the motion first, and only to keep unanimity on Council. My efforts throughout the years have to build consensus. I sense a consensus, and I won't thwart that. So I will vote as I see the majority likely to vote, just so I'm not offside. Nothing personal about it at all. I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you very much. That is passed, and thank you, Mr. Given and administration, for bringing that out. Councillor Demota, thank you for the motion, and the rest of you, thank you for the very kind words.
I just wanted to finish off by saying it. Although my tie isn't official municipal colors, over the years working alongside with you, I noticed that you wear a lot of blue. So I picked a blue tie today because I'm not entirely sure, because we never exchanged favorite color conversations before, but I did that in honor of you today. So thank you.
Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 7.2, the policy development and review policy. Mr. Given, did you wish to speak further to that?
Sure, Your Worship, only very briefly to note that this was at committee last week. I believe Council can see highlighted in the policy the amendments that were recommended by committee. And so they're relatively minor nature. The reminder is that the major change here is that this establishes a process for regular review of all council policies on a 4-year cycle. And so that is really the significant change, but highlighted in yellow, you'll see that some of the specific items discussed at committee have been addressed. I will leave it with that because I know that all of council hope this is the second time for you seeing this policy, and would leave it to council for discussion and debate.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Any further discussion with respect to the policy on policy development and review? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I didn't see anyone looking to make any further comments, so I would offer to make the motion that council approve policy A-001, the policy development and review policy as presented.
Thank you for that motion, Councillor Butler. Is there any debate? I have one observation, and I believe it was at my suggestion that we added the terms of review, and it was at Mr. Given's suggestion that those be added as a CAO responsibility. When I finally saw the words in print, it concerned me that we might be a bit ambitious. I counted our policies. There are 70 of them, each to be reviewed in a term with 2 meetings a month. That's 96 meetings and 70 policies to review. Not quite 2 a month, but approaching that. And that will require a great deal of staff time and resources, for which I am not sure we are necessarily prepared. In principle, it is a wonderful idea to review every policy in each term. The policy now says that the CAO will ensure that policies and accompanying administrative procedures are revised, or pardon me, reviewed every 4 years from the date adopted by council. I wonder whether we might cut our CAO and our staff just a tiny bit of slack and say instead that the CAO will endeavor to ensure, or something a little bit softer. I would hate to see us put unnecessary pressure for reviews which we may not have the capacity to resource. And that is my only concern. I think scheduled reviews are absolutely important. But as I say, with 70 policies out there, it was more than I expected to find when I counted them up. So it's an awful lot of work that we are putting on our administration. And although that administrative work is not our responsibility, we operate at the policy level. I just have a concern, and I wonder whether council is interested in softening that wording at all and recognizing that I was the one that suggested it in the first place. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. And thanks, Mayor, for bringing that up. I spent a little time thinking about that exact item. And the reason I found myself in the end okay with the wording is I believe that we've been, the wording in the policy is open as to what constitutes a review. My sense was that what we were really saying here is that the CAO should, in vernacular, have a look at each policy every 4 years, and that council should perhaps at least on an every 4 years basis have a look at every policy. But a review, I would suspect in most cases, would probably be perhaps not even brought to council, but the CAO having a look at a policy, recognizing that it is essentially valid as it stands and that no further action is needed. So that's how I found myself comfortable. And what I wouldn't like to see is a situation where a policy doesn't even have eyes cast over it on a term basis, and then we can end up with policies that are, many years behind. So that's how I read it, though I wouldn't necessarily be averse to softening that language around the lines that you have suggested.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Butler. And I am certainly prepared to go along with the motion as it stands. I just wanted to raise the issue to make sure that there was a level of understanding with respect to council expectations. And if I share your view that it can certainly be interpreted that the level of review and the deep analysis need not happen with every policy, every term. And if Mr. Given is continued to be comfortable with that, then I have made my remarks, but I will vote in favor of the motion. Go ahead, Mr. Given.
Your Worship, just first off, I want to say I appreciate the consideration for administrative workload. That's something council should be considering. In this case, though, I think it really is sort of in between of what you were bringing up, Your Worship, and what Councillor Butler brought up. Certainly not every policy review will be as in-depth. Many will be, you know, a bit of a look. Yes, this matches current practice. Yes, this is still legal. And from an administrative perspective, we feel that this one doesn't need deep review. So it would go to council with a cover report saying so. Just to be really clear, the CAO doesn't take the responsibility for review because these are, after all, council's policies. The CAO's responsibility is to ensure that each policy hits the council table once every 4 years for a review. And that review may be as simple as an administrative report saying, this is the policy. Administration's view is that this policy is currently relevant and up to date, and no further review is necessary. But it will be up to council to vote to decide whether that's the case or not, because after all, these are, of course, council's policies. So just to clarify, the CAO doesn't get to say, this one is fine, it doesn't need to go to council. My understanding of this policy, the way that I would implement it would be, each policy will come to council, even if it is with a very, very brief report saying administration believes this one is okay. Council is, in essence, do you agree that this one is okay and can mean and is current?
Thank you for that, Mr. Given. There is a motion on the table. Is there any further debate with respect to the motion? Right, I will call the question being that council approve policy A001, policy development and review as presented. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. Thank you for that. That takes us to agenda item 7.3, utility rate model. Again, Mr. Given.
Your Worship, again, this is coming as a recommendation from committee where it was discussed last week. I appreciate that given the complexity of the issue, there may be a desire for additional discussion. And just in terms of process, what we're asking council here to do is not to approve the finalization of utility rates, but really for a confirmation that council is in agreement that the three components listed in the report are appropriate for the structure of rates. At committee last week, there was additional direction to administration, basically to develop some concepts of what rates built on these three categories might look like. And I just want to be clear that administration is not expecting or requesting that council finalize their decision on utility rates. What we are asking is if there is a broad general agreement that these three categories are the right types of categories with which administration should do the additional work that would come back to council in public view before you make a final decision about utility rates. So really what we're asking for is a confirmation of a step along the way. And that's why this is here today. If council, and so the three sections that administration had brought forward last week and that council discussed were essentially a system access charge or fee that could be termed differently, but a fee that would cover the base system costs that are not directly tied to consumption of utilities. A tiered consumption charge that would be directly tied to consumption of water and output of wastewater, and an infrastructure replacement charge that would be dedicated towards repairing and replacing the infrastructure in the municipality in alignment with the asset management recommendations and plan that council received in the 2017 asset management study. So I won't go into the whole report in detail. Again, I know that council had a deep discussion about this last week. I'm happy to answer questions, but again, the reminder here is that we are not asking council to approve utility rates. We're asking council to confirm that you're supportive of doing the rest of the work based on this concept. with that, Your Worship, I will turn it back to Council.
Thank you, Mr. Given. Comments or discussion from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. I'm in favor of moving forward in the manner that we have discussed and brought forward from our past committee of the whole. However, for the community, I think it's important to understand that the three principles, if we want to think of them that way, that we are about to adopt are three of a number of important principles. And I think it's really important to understand that we have a number of important discussions ahead of us that might properly be thought of as principle-based discussions before we can end up with a new utility rates bylaw. And a few of them that come to my mind are, we have not really asked ourselves the question of, do we accept the need to raise an additional approximately $1.3 million through the utilities billing process through user fees? It's a lot of money. It means in excess of 4 times increase in utility billings if we go that route. We have received a recommendation that that is the quantum of money we need to be looking at. I myself find, having gone through that document pretty thoroughly, that there's a pretty good argument that that's the sort of money that is needed. It would represent essentially a little bit of a shift, that we would be building a utilities reserve. Only time will tell how quickly we spend as we go, but building utilities reserve to deal with the all of the skeletons in the closet or rusty valves in the ground as it stands. But that's an important question we have to look at. How much of that should be raised through user fees, or should some of it be raised through the tax system, is an important question that we haven't yet dealt with. Of course, a really big question is accepting the 3 categories that we have in front of us: base, system, tiered consumption, and infrastructure replacement. How much should be raised through each of those categories? And what's critical there is how much of the needed money would be raised through a consumption-based billing framework, and how much would be more based on a per service or per unit kind of costing. And then that brings me to a last really important category. When we talk about consumption-based billing or any billing, what do we consider to be a unit? And I talked about this last week. So I used the example of an apartment. So is an apartment occupied by a resident a unit, or is an apartment building the unit when we talk about tiering consumption? And while that might seem like a little bit of a detail, it's a really important detail. Again, would a 100 unit apartment building pay proportionately or disproportionately more than a 10 unit apartment building? Do we see the 100 unit apartment as a much bigger user than the 10 unit apartment, or do we see that 100 unit apartment building as being a collection of users? And that's really important when we look at how does tiering impact those who will be paying. So I don't want anyone in the community to think that we have answered all of those questions yet. This is, as Mr. Given said, just the beginning of a longer conversation, but one that we need to get on with forthwith, because we don't have a lot of time to deal with before the end of this council term. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor DeMota.
Well, I certainly understand the need for a change, and the model that we have isn't, really within best practice. And I think moving towards something like this is definitely beneficial for everyone, and will provide some equity for the community. And having said that, the money's got to come from somewhere. So regardless if it's collected here or on the tax side, what I'd like to see though is if when the shift is made, that it doesn't impact residents and businesses immediately. So although we need to kind of get our funding to go forward, you know, maybe have some reserve, I would hope that, you know, we could do this over a period of 3 years where we could finally get on side of where we need to be going, so that, you know, a lot of people are coming out of COVID and still when their year ends come out at the end of the year, wherever it's usually at the end of our seasonal cycle of visitation. So anywhere from the end of September to the end of January, usually when people have their year ends, businesses have their year end. So I think that a lot of businesses in the community, which a lot of our funding comes from, will be heavily impacted. And when they see their bottom lines at the end of the year, you know, and what they have to pay out in source deductions and you know, money that they've collected in GST, which, you know, I understand many use as cash flow throughout the season, that at the end of the year, there's going to be a hit. So, you know, instead of keep, you know, putting pressure on, or, you know, putting salt on the wound, so to speak, I'd like to see somehow a process of tiering us out collectively to where we need to be, so that there isn't a huge hit all in one shot when we make the shift. I think that's all I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Demota. We have yet to have a motion, so I will suggest now, rather than by way of potentially friendly amendment or other amendment, that recognizing the discussion to date and those comments made by Councillor Butler, that these components that we may be about to approve do not supplant other interests of principle that we have, including equity and fairness. So these are simply the way it can be done, but that doesn't stop our discussion about what is a fair allocation under these components. So I would suggest perhaps that the motion be adjusted a bit to say that council approve the development of a utility rate model with the following component charges for council consideration, making it clear that we have accepted those components. We will consider how they all work out, and we'll make those considerations in light of other principles that guide us, including overall equity and fairness within the community. So just a suggestion that rather than the motion as it is presented, with a few nuances to make it clear to the community that we understand some of the parameters, but we are not yet at all settled on the details. If it is the preference of council, I can pass the chair to Councillor Chernow as Deputy Mayor and make the motion myself, if you prefer. Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other hands waving, I am happy to let you do that if you like. Otherwise, I'm also satisfied to make the motion.
If you will make the motion, that's fine. That just makes it easier procedurally to carry on. So I'm certainly content with that.
I was happy to make it too, so.
Oh, well then I'll defer. I made the last
No, that's fine. Go ahead. I've been speaking a lot today, so I was just kind of waiting to see someone step up. That's all. That's fine.
Have we a motion from you, Councillor Demota?
Sure.
So be it.
Okay.
And Mr. Given,
does it have the wording that you just give? Because I like the change that you made there, but I didn't write it down.
Sorry. I have it written down, and if administration requires it, I can reword it when I, or not, yeah, reword it.
Just read it out, and then we can vote. I'm motioning it.
All right. Are you ready to have me call the question? The motion being from Councillor Demota. The motion being that council approve the development of a utility rate model with the following component charges: 1, base system access; 2, tiered consumption; and 3, infrastructure replacement, for council consideration. All those in favor? There are none opposed. That is carried. So thank you, Mr. Given. We'll look forward to the development of such a model based on those factors and give it consideration when it comes back to council. That takes us to agenda item 8, bylaws. We have no bylaws for consideration today. Agenda item 9 is just a letter from the Minister of Indigenous Relations, with whom I met in mid-June, June 18th. For interest's sake, for those who might not know, as we prepared for that meeting, the minister's office indicated that they would like an opportunity for a gift exchange. The minister received from us a painting of a caribou done by local artist Claude Bucock, and we received from the minister a book, I believe entitled The Indigenous History of Canada, which was donated to the museum and will be available for the public as an effort to increase awareness and aid reconciliation by making that sort of Indigenous history more available to more people. That takes us to other new business, and Councillor Keller-Hempe, 10.1, you wanted to discuss the parking lot.
Yes, that was one of our projects as this council, the commercial parking lot over in the S Block. And I was wondering if council would like a report on this. I'd be interested to know how the parking lot is going. I pass it every day and it seems to be a third full. I'm wondering if the parameters we put in as council is not working. I would be interested to hear a report from administration on what is actually happening with the rental of those areas, the parking stalls at the commercial parking lot, and to see if we need to change some of the parameters that we put in as this council in order for it to work better. Is council interested in seeing that report come back to a committee of the whole?
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Councillor Keller-Hempe, for bringing up the S Block parking lot. I do think it's something that this council should revisit and decide whether it has aligned with our values and with our priorities, and whether there is an alternative to bring the more fruition to that S Block parking lot, as it does look awfully lonely over there. So thank you. I would love to have a conversation about this in a future meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Juneau.
Thank you for that. We are told that the project is complete and we've really not received a report, so I'd like to review. But one of the questions that I have is, you say it's complete, and one of the main features that was being offered in this parking lot was streetlight parking, or street lighting for that area. And I see the lights are still not on. It's very scary when you're riding your bike from work at the far end of the industrial block and have to ride your bike at night completely in the darkness. And that was one of the things supposed to be done. So I like to see those lights turned on at night, please.
Thank you, Councillor Juneau. Councillor Demota.
Well, I know this doesn't really fall into the overall paid parking pilot project, but when we went through our strategic priorities review, I believe in August of 2019, one of the issues that we did address was recovering something from parking within the community, because to have you know, all of this pavement and parking base relying on local taxpayer dollars, you know, deserves some review, and whether it's going to be profitable or at least a break-even project. And I think that, you know, seeing all those empty spots out there, we can think outside the box and find a way to fill that space up so that we can get other vehicles and things off the streets, and provide better parking for residents and visitors in the community.
Thank you, Councillor Demoda. For myself, I would endorse Councillor Keller-Harampe's request for a report, and that could include the completion report and some information about the lighting, but more importantly, whether or not parameters that we set are working or expected to work. So, and I think that I have heard primarily support for that. And so in the absence of any objection from any councillor, I would suggest, Mr. Given, that it is the will of council that administration prepare to provide council with a report with respect to the S block parking.
Your Worship, so just for council information, if there's a topic like this that any council member wants to get information on, feel free to email me and copying all of council so they're aware. We can absolutely add items to a council committee of the whole process with the councillor's name beside it, so you can sort of speak to what you wanted to bring up. This today works well as well. Just, you know, for council's information, I wouldn't expect that we would be able to turn around this report for you for next week. And so Councillor Keller-Harampe, just in terms of your expectations, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page there. This is sort of, your request is to bring this to a future council committee of the whole meeting. Is that correct? If that's the case, heard, and administration can manage that. And again, for council's information, by all means, if there are issues that you need to get onto the public agenda, you all have the ability to do that by simply emailing administration, copying mayor and council, and we'll make sure to add whatever your item is to a council committee of the whole with your name beside it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Demoda?
No, I just wanted to really thank our colleague there, Councillor Keller, her MP, for bringing that forward. I really appreciate it, and it's worth the discussion. And I'm glad that it's at the forefront again. Thank you.
Councillor Butler?
Thanks very much, and thanks, Councillor Keller, MP. I also would like to see a report. I guess what I wanted to mention was in respect of Mr. Given's comment, and I very much appreciate that any councillor anytime can ask for an item to be placed on the agenda. That has never been a problem, but I suppose where Councillor Keller, her MP, felt that it was appropriate to bring it up in public with council is what we can't do and shouldn't do just by email is ask administration for a report. There's a difference between placing something on the agenda and requesting a report, because we should not individually really be trying to ask administration to do work. So I just thought that was an important distinction to point out, that I myself might ask for an item to be brought forward on the agenda that I would then speak to, but it's quite another matter to ask administration to prepare a report.
Quite right. Thank you, Councillor Butler. Is there any other new business for council? Councillor reports. I can advise that since our last meeting, I had another meeting with the West Yellowhead Regional Waste Management Authority, and I believe Mr. Given attended a meeting yesterday and got a briefing from Mr. Bertie Kreiner, who is now acting on behalf of that authority as we go through some governance issues. And so there will be something presented to council in the coming months. I would expect before September, but I don't know the date. But that is ongoing. And while I'm reporting, I can report that Mr. Given and I attended the NETMA meeting a week or so ago. Very well attended. I thought it was an opportunity certainly for Mr. Given to meet people in the community, and I'm sure he took advantage of that. And that is all I have to report. Other reports? Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ireland. I'd like to report that on Monday, I believe you will be with me on Zoom. We will be attending a reconciliation for municipalities session that the AUMA is putting on there. I'm excited to attend.
Thank you. I see no other hands. Just to add to my report for upcoming things, I have a request and will meet with our MLA, Mr. Lawn, on Thursday. His office has been secretive about the nature of the meeting, but assured me that I would be pleased. So about a week from now, perhaps I will be able to tell you why I was pleased, but we shall see. In any event, I will be meeting with our MLA on Thursday when our schedules allow. If there are no other reports, we have no upcoming events scheduled. Is there anything upcoming of which any councillor might know that should come to the attention of all of council? If not, it is early in the day. I would invite a motion to adjourn and we can all go out and begin celebrating Jasper's 20th anniversary. Councillor Wilson, I will take it that that is your motion to adjourn. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Enjoy the day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Happy anniversary.